World of Warcraft has created an inescapable bubble. Final Fantasy XIV is about to open the floodgates and iterate on its most popular feature. Guild Wars 2 is adding raiding back and it's giving player housing. And Destiny 2 just made its key expansion feature more accessible than ever before. Ladies and gentlemen, the winds are changing. And perhaps irrevocably. Speaking of MMOs, this video is brought to you by Elder Scrolls Online. I've jumped in for the very first time, added it to our MMO collection, and their Gold Road expansion, which has a whole bunch of stuff, especially some really deep stories in their side content that I wasn't expecting. It's such worth checking out if you're looking to investigate the Elder Scrolls universe. Their new zone is Westweald, where you get started. A mystery character has arrived, a prince forgotten, and memories to be found and rediscovered, and all that kind of thing to uncover. But of course, on top of that, they've got a brand new 12-man trial to be checking out, a whole bunch of new zones. And within those regions, players are going to be introduced to new characters, challenges, rewards, armor sets, and stories. And additionally, new delves, public dungeons, standalone quests, and Miramore Incursion world events, which I've checked out as well. Loads to be excited about. Check out the link down below. And a big thanks to Elder Scrolls for supporting us in our MMO adventure. You may not have noticed if you've been playing one of these four giants in the MMO market. Of course, there are other big names, and we're going to be watching how they respond to what these guys have done. So what? What is happening? The MMO world has been, relatively speaking, stagnant since 2004 in terms of major genre-changing moves. It often gets glossed over, but WoW's major chess move wasn't just great combat for its time and a decent world, it was actually accessibility. WoW was responsible for bringing MMOs to the general masses. Your grandma could play WoW, and does. Compared to the ultra-degen, nerd-exclusive world MMOs lived in before, it was now so easy and less punishing that it was the point of mockery from the true gamers.
LOL. LOL. Maybe this is like how you're supposed to play, like... No, it's not really any harder like that. I mean, I should take my balls out, like... Oh, I can, like, play with my balls, like... Yeah, my balls are playing, like...
But as we know, it didn't matter. The game was insanely populated now that casuals could enjoy it. The gameplay, rock solid, and we know it did very, very well. But what happened since then? The TLDR is people wanted some of that money that Blizzard was shoveling into its greedy mouth, and many attempts were made to take the crown. Off the top of my head, Age of Conan, Matrix Online, the Warhammer MMO, Aeon Online, Terra, Wildstar, all have fallen, despite each of them bringing something new and unique to the table. Two things here, right? I'm obviously aware there are hundreds, if not thousands, of MMOs that are just trucking along merrily all day, every day, right now, right? Old school RuneScape is doing great. I recently discovered, while making this, that Neocron, the first ever MMO I ever played, still live, still getting patch notes, still getting server updates, all the business. And after a little Google, it seems it has an active player base of around 35 people, and it's doing okay. Success is relative. I'm saying you don't consider yourself a failure on YouTube because you're not getting Mr. Beast numbers, right? Second thing, I did list a lot of dead MMOs, and I know those games will have die-hard fans who truly believe they didn't have the right moments, the right time and place. This should have been great. It was everybody else who sucked, all those kind of things. But ultimately, my friends, they died for a reason. And there's always going to be fans. There are people who like certain things. There are people out there who probably like Will Smith's After Earth.
I'm not a coward!
You get my point. So, what's the problem, and how has it changed the genre? Player retention. MMOs have all concluded the same thing. If people's friends stop playing, or your world becomes empty, then more people leave at a faster rate. It's a domino effect all the way down. When guilds collapse or the content is simply so bad it can't even tempt the loyal to stick around, then disaster inevitably follows. Now, it used to be that you could get away with mediocre content or massive content droughts and still be fine. And that was mainly because there wasn't much else on the market to really satisfy that itch that MMOs provide. More on that later. But now, that isn't the case. The gaming market has some insanely good options to turn to when players start experiencing friction in their favourite game. So, How does the MMO makers solve this? Let's call it problem A. It's physically impossible to create enough quality content at a pace that players won't consume faster than you can make it. MMO gamers are notorious for gobbling up story, raids, dungeons in a matter of weeks compared to the months that it takes to create. So then we get solution A, and it seems like the logical fix. Create a constant gameplay loop players are incentivized to do, but can't complete for a significant amount of time, aka a grind. It makes sense, of course, but inevitably it has one final conclusion, which would be summarized as WoW's Shadowlands expansion, with a seemingly never-ending amount of chores to do. Now, I know, we crap on Shadowlands a lot, and rightly so, but more importantly, it's become a case study for many games on what you shouldn't do, what doesn't work. I have had several off-camera discussions with leaders of major video games that you've probably all played concerning Shadowlands specifically from a business standpoint. Let's just say it was a lesson learned across the industry.
So now we get to the really cool stuff. Well, cool for us players, but absolutely terrifying if you are making a new MMO. I'm really fortunate. I've managed to sit down with some of the absolute paragons and leaders of this genre, IRL, face-to-face, on and off camera, and they all have very different takes on how to solve solution A. And all of them have an advantage that no other game that is being made now, or is currently out, has access to, and they're all utilizing it in different ways. Now, let's start with World of Warcraft. You might remember when I sat down with Ian and he said this about Torghast.
You had a long day at work, then you went out for dinner with your friends, with your loved ones, whatever. You come home, you're exhausted, and you realize like, oh crap, I haven't done my Torghast run
Been
for
there
the
many
week.
times.
Exactly. Does that make you feel good about World of Warcraft in that moment?
no.
Absolutely not. And so why are we doing that to people?
So what we do know is you can't make enough content to satisfy an MMO audience, but we also now know you can't force them to grind. You can't have them logging in every day and being upset and disgruntled at the content they're being made to do. So how do we solve this player retention problem? Well, let's start with Blizzard's idea. Blizzard obviously saw the success of Classic. It did very, very well, and we can see that on the sub-number metrics that were released recently. But they then realized something else. They have 20 years of content. 20 years of polished, refined, beloved content just sitting there, not doing anything. And that's when it dawned on them. Can't just keep re-releasing Classic, sure they will one day, but you can't spam it. But what you can do is add new things. And that is what we have seen happen in the last 6 months. These are your WoW Classic Hardcores, Plunderstorm, Mop Remix. Now, of course, we have no idea how many people just stick to retail, but definitely some of them also want that glam and transmog from Mop Remix, and probably also crossover like this. The exact numbers are, of course, remaining unknown to us. But what we do know is that they hope people who play Classic will come over to Mop Remix to get some rewards, then get a free character for the War Within, then go that way, and now they don't need to pollute retail. They don't need to fill it with all those grinds and things, because if you're tired and frustrated with retail, guess what? You've got Season of Discovery over here. So you can now go over to this area, go and play Season of Discovery. Oh, but there's now new stuff coming with the seasonal, I can go there. Or maybe now, I like Season of Discovery, I can go all the way into WoW Classic if I want to as well. The important thing that Blizzard's done, that's changed the game, and literally no one else can do this. No one. They can keep you inside the WoW bubble. People paying a sub to play here are worth the same as the people paying here and here. A sub is a sub. And more importantly, your money isn't going to some other company. The comfy, familiar blanket of World of Warcraft is now available everywhere without the need to spam one of these with update after update after update.
Switching MMOs is a really big deal for a lot of people. People do not like change. MMOs by nature are habitual. Have you ever had a large group of people swap games for a single day? I have. It's a clown show. The UI is different. I don't know the stats. I don't know what the classes do at endgame, and they ditch that game quickly. Blizzard's bubble is growing faster than it ever has.
Let's go back to droughts and content releases mentioned earlier. Look at this. Typically, Blizzard is utter chaos. In the past, Blizzard has averaged a new content patch every 120 to 150 days, with some absolutely hilarious outliers, like Siege of Orgrimmar being the last patch before the 429-day gap until Warlords of Draenor. Or, of course, more recently, a single patch for Shadowlands took longer to make than the release of all the patches of Warlords of Draenor combined. But oh, what is this? Since Dragonflight, that average, that 100 plus days, has dropped to 26 days. A total, utter obliteration and a fraction of what it once was. It's really interesting when we look at these numbers. You can see the number 77 pops up a lot. 77 days, 11 weeks, right? More than to be coincidence. There is no doubt the internal target for content release is 11 weeks. We see this as far back as Wrath of the Lich King. And when they don't hit that target, it's typically pushed to somewhere around 144 days. In other words, pushed into the next patch window. It doesn't always work for sure, but it's pretty close. Now it gets more interesting. We can see that the classic team and the retail teams seemingly do work with this same schedule in mind of 11 weeks each. However, they don't always hit those targets, but now it's for different reasons. The change in that window is simply due to overlapping releases of new content, as there is so damn much coming out, it would literally be releasing on the same day. Let me give you a clear example. Wrath of the Lich King Classics ICC patch, something much looked forward to. We're going to get those Deathbringers wills. If it would have come out on the 11-week cycle like its previous patch did, it would have released on the exact same day as they were releasing 10.1.7, the Dawn of the Infinite Heroic, and the Dream Surges patch in retail WoW. This is speculation, of course, I've never had this confirmed, but as we always say, Blizzard never does anything in small moves, and this improvement of content cadence is impressive and very on brand for the big boy. There needs to be a word of warning here, though. Based on what we've seen, Blizzard is risking putting themselves back into a Shadowlands daily scenario. You can predict that guy who's finishing work and loves World of Warcraft, he can't wait to get home, and he plays everything. He might end up in that scenario that Ian mentioned. He's got some things to do with his family. He's also got his Cataclysm raid tonight. He's also got to get onto retail to do his vault. He's also then got to get onto Mott Remix in order to do his bronze dailies, because he's after that mount that he's been farming for literal years. It might not happen. We don't know what the crossover of players is, but there will be some. And frustration and burnout could get very real. Blizzard has changed the game. The ecosystem they've created cannot be matched by anybody who has an MMO now, and certainly any MMO that's coming in the future. Look at it this way. Dragonflight has released 20 patches since it launched. Only 9 of them were for the new, current retail game. 11 of those patches are using old, reused, modified assets for content that has just been sat on their servers for years and years at this point. And I am not bashing them for this. It's working. It's fun. It's exciting. It's interesting. They have managed to create a world where their games are not polluted, not bogged down with needless content. They're just releasing it elsewhere and keeping their players going round the ecosystem over and over again while staying within their familiar comfort zone that MMO players really enjoy. And they're doing all of this without giving a single penny to another company. But the other titans of this genre have also been paying attention, and they have come up with ways of defeating this problem themselves, using their strengths in a way that probably no other MMO, in creation now or coming in the future, could possibly compete with. And we will be looking at that in part 2, because this video is already very, very long. I do want to thank ESO for sponsoring this video, and you players of ESO, you better watch out, because I'm going to see you soon.